You know, if there's one question I get asked more than any other, more even than what would you do if you found a dead body in your hotel room, that question would have to be, Mark, is the excitement of the new all it's cracked up to be? Or is there a comfortable familiarity rather than contempt in slowly getting to know a photographic location? Well, today, we're going to try and answer that question. So here I am in a hotel room and no dead body, unless that dead body is me collapsing under the weight of this photographic conundrum about familiarity. I'm in the, let's face it, privileged position of being able to travel for work, and what that means is I go to new places. I land and I get off an airplane or I step out of a hotel room and I'm faced with this shiny excitement of the new. But what does that really mean for photography? How can I bring insights into a place that is completely new to me? Look, it's that old etic versus emic debate, the insider versus the outsider. Sure, I can come and I can look objectively at something new and perhaps provide some insights from that outside perspective. But where are those real insights that come from within? From actually immersing myself in an environment and starting to experience that environment the way that a local would. Surely wouldn't that make me a better photographer? So while there's something interesting in the cultural dissonance of looking at the world through fresh new eyes, I'm also aware that there's a certain post-colonial tendency to that. I also don't buy into that emic immersive perspective either. I mean, I've been in Australia for 40 years. You'd think I'd know the place, but my Australia is not the same as my wife's, who grew up in the country, or my kids, whose frame of reference is a 21st century Australia, different from my life coming into the country in the 1980s. So what does that mean when it comes to photography? Well, that's the stuff that plagues me when I'm not drinking wine and watching bad television. And here in China, well, wine is expensive, and yes, the television is bad, but it's all in Chinese. So it's got me thinking about a time I was in China back in May, where I was there for a little bit longer, 5 weeks in one location in Songjiang near Shanghai, working and living like a local rather than simply flying in and flying out. And you know what? It was one of the most photographically rewarding experiences of my life. I actually did get a bit familiar with the place. I lived there, I worked there rather than passing through like a spicy curry after a night out on the grog. Now, I say it was rewarding. Don't get your hopes up about the pictures themselves. What I'm talking about here is the process and the different perspectives. And of course, one of the things that bring different perspectives is using different equipment. I had my Nikon Z6, but I had multiple lenses, including this 28mm f2.8 that I've done a video about recently, and this Nikon 14 to 30mm ultra wide angle. I also had film cameras, but most importantly too, I had a nice little pocket camera in my Fuji X30. All of them literally gave me a different perspective on the place. At least if perspective means focal length, sensor, and technology. Another day, another city. Welcome to Hangzhou. Let's face it, one hotel room looks very much like another. And one of the things, I guess, about being in a familiar place is that you don't have to remember from day to day another random 3 or 4 digit number. Yes, I have forgotten my hotel room on many occasions. For this time, I didn't stay in the same hotel the full 5 weeks I was there. My first location was the Hotel Minimax, which sounded cool and actually looked pretty cool from the outside as well. It did have a couple of minor annoyances though. Firstly, the room was unbearably hot. Now that's okay if you can open a window. I could open a window in this case, but I was inviting in a melange of aromas, some spicy, some fragrant, some pungent, all combining into a heady concoction of noxious gases that really just, it was like a First World War battle trench rather than some salubrious lodging. I couldn't avoid the smell, I couldn't avoid the sound, but the phrase yang rou chua is now added to my vocabulary, burned in my neural pathways like a plough furrowing through the left hemisphere of my brain. After 2 weeks, I couldn't bear it anymore, and I moved to a tired and seedy Ramada across the road, where they spoke even less English, but at least the air conditioning worked. But I still... That was yesterday. Today is today, and I'm now in Shenzhen. Before, I was rudely interrupted by my microphone battery dying. I was talking about how I kept returning to that street. It became my patch, my turf. It became a place where I started to get to know the local street vendors. I was the Waiguoren that sampled their flavorful offerings that I got to know as soupy bowls with stuff in them or shit on sticks. Look, I can't promise to be an expert on Chinese cuisine, and realistically, I could probably pick up a few more subscribers if I set this in my kitchen as I was making portaullada danta. No, I'm not an expert on that. You're stuck with me rambling on about Chinese philosophy, photography, and getting to know a place with a certain level of familiarity. In the end, it's about food, isn't it? Food is the great leveler. It's one of those things that brings us together. And I enjoyed getting to see people in their environment, drinking, eating as they interacted with each other. Those yellow buzzing things around the food stalls are actually Meituan drivers, not bees, though they spread their wares like industrious little workers, pollinating the populace with tasty morsels. learned to point at things, nod eagerly, and ask for the right amount of seasoning. 不太辣, 微辣. And then, like Henri Cartier-Bresson's boy carrying the bottles of wine home proudly to his parents, I would grab my cup of shit on sticks, walk back to my hotel room and devour them eagerly after a long day at the chalk face. I mean, I compare myself to the innocence of childhood, but really, I was much more like one of Bresson's old drunk peasants, drowning out his misery with cheap wine. Although really, I talk about cheap wine in China. Cheap wine, China, it's an oxymoron. Bad wine, China, yes, but cheap wine, no. Well, for this toxic moron, fruit of the vine, work of human hands, it has become my spiritual drink. And fortunately, in Wanda Plaza, it's not the center of Shanghai, it's Songjiang, so I was able in the basement supermarket to find some moderately exorbitant wine rather than the prohibitively exorbitant wine that you'll find in the more boutique centers. In fact, Wanda Plaza became my second home. It was a bright cornucopia of overpriced goods to feed the materialistic masses. It was a stark contrast to the shopping street outside. Chaos gave way to order, an almost algorithmic geometrical environment that I became very familiar with. It reduced complexity, it appealed to my designerly eye. It was a place I became comfortable. Have you ever had that experience where you go to an unfamiliar shopping center or you go to a particular supermarket that you've never been to before? You want a jar of pickles, but you don't know if you're going to find it in the tinned vegetable section or the specialty aisle. And I guess that's what this video is about in the end. As you become familiar with a place, the disorientation fades, your eyes adjust, you get your bearings, the noise fades, and you start to notice those particular little things that draw your attention. It's in our nature to see patterns. One of the things that I teach in design is how you can use certain techniques to draw attention. One of them is noticing things that change. Look at this example. Random dots that when things actually move within them, you start to see the shapes. Call it pareidolia, call it that natural human instinct to find and perhaps impose a certain sense of order in the world. But that's what familiarity is about. That is what photography is about. Subtle changes become more noticeable. A place looks different during the day than it does at night. That's obvious, obviously. But since photography is light, the time of day can make a huge amount of difference. During the hard light of day, the place was functional, but it was a little bit soulless. But I found myself there very often getting dinner just around sunset as the light was changing from harsh, bright daylight to a more muted tone, and I noticed just how it started to render things with a delicate beauty. It gave me this sense of connection to a place that was starting to feel a little bit more like home. From sunset to blue hour to darkness. The natural world gave way to a technicolor tableau of artificial light. The place looked different. It had a completely different aura. Literally, the world glowed. then the rain set in. Who doesn't love a reflection? Reflections amplify, they dial things up to 11.
Turn it up to 11!
But in the end, when we're talking about getting familiar with a place, are we really talking about a place? Because, let's face it, people are much more fascinating than things. I love taking photographs of buildings, I love geometry, I love streets, but I have to admit that part of the reason is simply the buildings don't move when you ask them to pose for you. So let's actually take just a second now to reflect on the one thing that really makes things important, and that's people. People are people wherever you go. Look, I know I'm just reciting Depeche Mode now, and probably I'm far too tired to actually make much sense, but one of the things that really fascinated me about Songjiang was that it was a livable place. Unlike the city, which is plastic, which is sterile, where people are really just objects moving around in a space, Songjiang was a livable city. And as I wandered around, it was a place where I saw people walking their dogs, even buying pets. Talk about the swarming petri dish of humanity. Depeche Mode sang People Are People, and The Doors sang People Are Strange. And I've got both on my Spotify playlist. Look, I was there for Qingrenjie, which is kind of a Chinese equivalent of Valentine's Day, though apparently they don't discriminate. They just express love for everyone they're close to. Friends, lovers, parents, even teachers, though I wasn't teaching that day, so I did not get a customary apple, though the friendliness, respect and generosity of students in China is not something you're likely to see in an Australian university. One of the beauties of Chinese society is that it's transgenerational. Coming out of the single-child policy, it's not unusual to have 3 generations of people living together in one apartment. I mean, I knew that before I came, of course, but over time I got to witness the little intimacies that bind family together, and if not exactly understand, I started to at least see those invisible tendrils that thrum and connect people. Perhaps the most visible manifestation of this is the way people come together on the streets to dance. They do it for exercise, they do it for fun, and there's just something wonderful about a society of individuals that recognize and respect each other while coming together in common for organized activity. Outdoor organised activity is nothing new, and you should see the yoga classes that go on the beaches and parks where I come from. But I do want to be one of those old retired people, one of those tue shola ren one day. Bored yet? If you've stuck it this far, then maybe you can consider subscribing for more content and ringing that notification bell, because most importantly, I do want to hear from you. Comment down below. Let's contextualize this analysis. Statistically speaking, n equals 1 is no measure of certainty of any of the insights here. It's just my impressions. Your experience of both China and photography and familiarity may be completely different, and I want to hear from you. About the only thing I can say with certainty is that the more I do become familiar, the less I know. Look, I didn't go native. I still speak Mandarin like a 2-year-old, and I can palpably feel the frustration of my colleagues when I try to add them to WeChat. I get it. I've had to help my mother-in-law connect to Wi-Fi. I'm still an outsider, and maybe I'll always be, but experiencing Songjiang at different times of day, different times of week, through different weather, and exploring some of its areas did at least give me some insights into both my own photographic practice and this wonderful place I got to experience for a short time and almost got to call home. Not emic, definitely etic. I've become aware of some of the nuances of the culture, but I'm equally conscious that I've barely scratched the surface and I still run the risk of overgeneralizing. But I do think that having the time to adjust to a new place gives you the chance to at least level up from blindly ignorant to enthusiastic neophyte. And of course, you do know that at some point I'm going to be doing a video of about how familiarity can breed contempt for a location, the difficulty of finding inspiration when you feel like you have taken every possible photograph of a place that it has to offer. Scarborough Beach, Western Australia, yes, I'm looking at you. Later.